25. The buildings changed as the afternoon cooled. They still showed signs of age, but there was less decay. Doors were in place and windows and shutters fitted. Repairs had been carried out, tiles scavenged from other buildings, fresh brickwork in places, drainpipes fashioned from a variety of pipes. Water fell from the sky. Not rain so much as a persistent dampness. The paving beneath his feet was bright with moisture and the air tasted fresh. Fresher than the desolation around the tunnel. And he was being watched. There was movement behind windows. A figure darted from the rear of a house, racing parallel to the road Rodin trod, no doubt warning others of the imminent arrival of a stranger. There was no attempt to stop him, and no attack. The people remained hidden, biding their time, watching and learning. He knew he was in the right place. Unclear memories told him he had been here before. They told him this was the place where the rejects had banded together. The place where they worked as one. He had accepted their hospitality once before, all those years ago. They had offered him food and drink, then sent him on his way. He was no danger, but they were not willing to take him in. If he survived, it would be on his own. One of the buildings was a store. Rodin knew this. The door was ajar, and Rodin could recall the shelving, the shadowy figure watching him, paying attention to everything he touched. He was ready for goods to be slipped into a pocket. Ready for an excuse to use the weapon he held shielded by his cape. Rodin turned, knowing what he would find. He was not disappointed. The door of the building in front of him was slightly open. Rodin could make out a long counter and tables surrounded by mismatched chairs. He caught the aroma of food, heavy with grease. There was movement within, accompanied by the low murmur of conversation. Bars were always good for information. Rodin pushed the door wider and entered. It was dark with a heavy smoke-filled atmosphere. Lights hung from the walls, casting deep shadows that flickered across the floor. There was the subtle hiss of gas, no mains power, not this far out. Eyes tracked him as he walked confidently to the bar. He heard low voices, none of them aimed at him. But he noted the movement by the door, those closest preparing to create a barrier or to speed him on his exit. The woman behind the bar watched him approach, a bored look on her face, chewing slowly, her mouth open. "You do food?" Rodin rested his wrists on the bar.
"Who are you?"
"Just passing through." She tilted her head, looking him up and down.
"Don't recognize you."
Rodin resisted the urge to smile. He knew it wouldn't comfort her, it would probably make her more uncertain. "Like I said, just passing through."
"Nothing stopping you. Carry on passing through."
She nodded to the door. Rodin changed tactic. "I can pay for food." It was a risk, admitting he had money. It might get unwelcome interest from some of those sitting around, pretending they were not listening in. The woman folded her arms over her flat chest, pulling down her top slightly to reveal a thin neck, the leathery skin running in folds. Rodin wondered when she had lost her weight, if it was gradual or sudden, a lifetime out here, or one particular moment. She reached her decision.
"Cold sandwich."
Rodin looked towards the door behind her, where he assumed food was prepared. He made a point of sniffing the air. Hot food would be better.
"Cost you more."
He nodded. "And a drink." The glass she used was clean enough, but the beer she didn't ask what he wanted looked like soapy water with a greasy head. Rodin knew he wasn't going to enjoy this. She named a price, and he placed the coins in her outstretched hands, feeling her sweaty fingers closing around his. Then the coins were lost in one of her pockets. There was no till. It wasn't that kind of place. She nodded to a spare table stuck in a corner. The chair looked about to collapse, and even from this distance Rodin could tell the table legs were uneven.
"I'll bring the food over."
He gave his thanks and made his way through the room, conscious of the eyes following him. He knew how he appeared to them. A stranger, well-built, holding himself tall, unafraid. These people wouldn't trust him, but he thought it likely that they would be wary of trying anything stupid. There would be others who would not think so clearly, but they would be keeping to themselves, hidden away in their hovels. The type of people who congregated out here would have a certain amount of sense. This would be the intellectual elite. The ones who stuck together. Safety in numbers. That was why Ratch was not alone. Had he called in a favor with Sharoff, or had his friend offered to help? Rodin shifted the chair, giving himself a clearer view of the room, aware of how eyes avoided his own quick glances, followed by heads bowed in conversation. Rodin avoided singling anyone out, concentrating instead on the foul drink. He started to regret ordering food. The woman brought it over, limping across the room. A slice of something steaming between two thin slices of off-white bread on a chipped plate. Rodin felt his stomach turn, but he nodded his thanks and watched her head back, noticed the way her clothes hung from her frame. Maybe malnourished, but he thought it likely there was something else. Something eating her away from inside. He doubted she had long to live. She stopped by a couple of tables, bending low to exchange words. From the glances, Rodin knew he was the subject of conversation. And he made a note of who showed most interest. One was a tall man wearing a wide-brimmed hat, pushed far back to reveal a large nose over a bushy mustache, making slow gestures with his hands. Then a fatter man who appeared to be sweating profusely, and who took great gulps of his drink, much of it spilling down the folds of his chin. And his colleague, thinner but still with bulk, hair cropped close to his skull, and a gap in his teeth visible through his always open mouth. Rodin ate the excuse for a sandwich, forcing down each mouthful. He could not tell what the meat was, greasy, fatty, and he had to pull out some of the gristle, but at least the beer helped wash it down. It left a bad aftertaste, and he vowed to have some of the supplies in his pack as soon as he could. Even decades-old processed food was better than this. Open mouth stood. The effect on the whole room was immediate. People settled back in their chairs, exhaling in a mass silent sigh. It was a release. Someone was doing something about the stranger in their midst. The man looked to his feet as he crossed the room, ignoring the nods and vague smiles from those around. The woman, her hands on the counter, was following his movements, and had been joined by a man dressed in grey overalls who placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't look at him. He didn't look at her. The man with the open mouth took a chair from a nearby table and placed it by Rodin's opposite him, but still with a view of the room. He sat with a grunt. Unfit. Ill.
You passing through?
Rodin nodded.
Good.
Rodin took another mouthful, chewing, and looked up. The man was watching Rodin's hands. Either ready for something to happen, or he couldn't face his eyes. Rodin needed information, but he had to play this well. Take it, you don't get many visitors here. He didn't meet the man's eyes, but he saw the shake of his head.
Every now and then.
Right. Appear more communicative. Settle into a conversation. Not much around here then?
We have enough for ourselves.
Yep. Took another bite, smaller this time. He talked while finishing chewing. Take it, not many visitors hang around. The man shrugged.
If they want to, we don't stop them. Unless they make trouble.
Many of them do that?
We don't like trouble. Most people come this way, they're running from trouble. Sometimes we help them leave the trouble behind. Sometimes the trouble comes looking for them.
Rodin knew the man was trying to work out where Rodin himself fitted in this. Was he leaving trouble or bringing it? Rodin decided to push. So what happens if trouble follows them? Their eyes met. Only briefly, before the man turned. But the glance had been hard. Threatening, but an undertow of fear. Rodin was used to that.
Depends,
he said after a pause.
Depends on the trouble. Sometimes we see it off. But sometimes that means more trouble on its way. Sometimes it's better to let the trouble play out. Upsets things for a while, then it's all back to normal.
The man was smart. He had Rodin pegged as trouble, and suspected he was looking for someone. There was a good chance Sharoff and Ratch had come this way. Makes sense. I always say you have to choose your fights with care. He hoped the man would pick up on the implication, but just to push the point home he said, sometimes it's best to hurry things onto their end. Another nod. They were understanding one another. The man glanced around the room. The woman at the counter gave him a nod.
It's getting popular here.
he said, returning his attention to Rodin's hands.
We had another couple of visitors, about a week ago.
This had been discussed before, most likely in this very room. 2 people on the run, 2 people who could bring trouble. The residents had talked about what they could do. They didn't like their peace broken. And they had decided that should trouble follow the visitors, they would not step in the way. They would let things take their course. Then the problem would go away. Really? Rodin put the rest of the sandwich down. Only a couple more bites, but he couldn't face it. Combined with the beer, he hated to think what state his stomach would be in later. He didn't want to face Sharoff and Ratch with his guts churning. The man nodded.
Running away. Didn't say anything like, but it was obvious.
They get far.
Couple of streets away. Think they're holed up in one of the houses by the old factory.
Another shrug.
They might have moved on by now.
Rodin again resisted the urge to smile. The man knew exactly where they were, and he knew they hadn't moved on. The residents here had a problem, and they wanted it to go away. Rodin was the one to do that.
We don't mind people passing through, you know. Only thing is, we don't like it when they make a mess. So long as they clear up after themselves and carry on without giving us problems, we're fine.
Rodin nodded. He got the message. Do your job, sort out your problem, and leave us as we were. He took another swig of the beer, leaving the last quarter, noticing the particles floating to the bottom of the glass. Then, with a smile to the woman, a smile that wasn't returned, he rose. Thanks for the company. Appreciate it. Those by the door were eyeing him warily, one with a hand in his lap. Rodin could make out a club of some kind. Another held his side, and Rodin knew a blade was hidden in his clothing. But they didn't prevent him leaving. Rodin almost felt the sigh of relief from the room when he opened the door and stepped into the afternoon warmth. He looked around, making out a larger structure a couple of streets away. It looked like an old factory. Time to get his job done.